let's see, ambivalence that I need to speak out loud just to get through it. As most of you know, other than being the co-senior minister of this community, I'm the president of our international organization, which means that I'm away quite a bit more than I used to be. And I have ambivalent feelings about that. I love the work that I'm doing in the world, but I miss you when I'm gone. And I heard in the announcements you all are going to get to talk about bear poop on Tuesday. I can't be here. But I'm going to deal with it. I don't want to talk about bear poop anymore. I do, however, still to contribute in my own way. We had a little thing that happened when Barbara left town. She worked for days to get everything done, and with this invitation to our celebration and commitment dinner, needed to go out, and she had it all prepared except the quote on the front. She left a note that said, when we have the quote, we'll print this out and mail it. And so we're in Napa, California doing our ministers gathering out there, which Barbara is the chair of the minister council for our organization, and did a splendid job of leading, as they say, the cats. It was just an incredible experience, and let's acknowledge Barbara for being a great leader. And we got the call, or I guess it was an email from Nancy and Christy saying, still need that quote. And I want you to know they did a great job. They went off looking for quotes and came up with a couple of dozen amazing quotes. And I went to work too, seeing what I could find, and I found one that popped for me. And those of you that have seen it, actually we asked one person. They said, hey, I got my invitation. I said, what did you think of the quote? I didn't notice it. So, I want to give you all an opportunity to notice it because I'm going to share it with you. And it goes like this. The spiritual path is not a solo endeavor. In fact, the very notion of someone freeing him or herself is a delusion. We are in it together, and the company of spiritual friends helps us realize our interconnectedness. Isn't that great? That comes from Tara Brach, who is a psychologist, an American psychologist, but is also steeped in the Buddhist tradition, teaches Eastern philosophy. And that one just popped for me, so everybody sort of agreed, and we put that on the front cover. And that's kind of where my head's been around since then, was playing with this idea of who we are and why we come together, why we do this thing together. Why don't we all just go out in the world and read the great books and do the courses online and just be satisfied with that? Why do we get up on Sunday morning or a Monday night or Tuesday night and come to the center whenever something's happening here and connect? Why do we go through all that? It would be so much easier just to sit at home, but we don't. We come here. And I get to see a lot of spiritual communities in the work that I'm doing right now, and there are some amazing and wonderful communities. Last Sunday I was in Kelowna, British Columbia, and they have a great community. They made me in a big theater, just great people. We had all kinds of opportunities to share and learn from them, and I was honored to be there for their 20th anniversary. Yet I come here and I remember this community and what we do here, and it's extraordinary. We have this great thing going on. And we keep showing up. Most of us do. Not everybody keeps showing up. You might notice from time to time somebody stops coming. And I've come to a theory on why that is. Barbara gave a talk not too long ago that had to do with, do you come here to get or do you come here to be? And I think that's the key to it. I think people who come here to get, specifically to get something, to heal something, to work something out, to learn something, if that's why they're here, they're going to leave. Sooner rather than later, they're going to leave. And that would include some of the people in the room here, because if that's your intention, is to get something, we all are getting stuff, and I'm not saying don't get stuff, get the stuff, but if that's your clear and absolute intention, your primary reason for being here, you're going to leave. And the reason is you're either going to get it, and you don't need this place anymore, and off you go. Or you're not going to get it, you think this is a bunch of bogus stuff, and you're going to leave. Either way. However, if you come here to be something greater than you thought you were before, you can stay here as long as you want, and keep getting, and keep experiencing what this is, because the work that we're doing is on the inside anyway. We reflect on each other's ideas. We model how to use this philosophy called the science of mind, how to live in a world that believes that God really is everything and that everything's a spiritual experience. And from that place, we change. We become clear about who we are. And we realize the more clear we are about who we are, the more there is to understand about who we are. That whole idea about the Higgs boson is phenomenal, that the science is finally catching up with us and being acknowledged in the world, because we do know that everything that exists within that oneness of spirit. But practicing it, remembering it, is different. It takes a bit of a different angle. And that idea of well, I read the book, or I took the class. I got this. No, you didn't. You may be getting it, but you're not there, because none of us are. Unless, no matter what happens in the world, in your world, no matter what kind of challenge shows up, no matter what kind of disappointment or unrealized expectation shows up, and you can go, well, that's just perfect. That's wonderful. That's exactly what needed to happen for me to know who I am. If you can do that, you're well along the way, but most of us still go, bear poo, and stay in that space for a little while, because we didn't get what we thought we were going to get. It didn't turn out the way we thought it was going to turn out. But the truth is that life is unfolding exactly as it must, through us, to be the life that calls us to be who we're here to be. What do you get? You get what you get. You get a reflection of your consciousness. So if you walk away from this place going, I didn't get it, I got to go look somewhere else, you're on a long path. If, however, you realize that it's what's going on inside of you that's guiding you through this, and that it's your way of being in the world that is going to reflect that into your life and everyone's life around you, then you got to come to a place like this, because this is where it's safe to practice. Yeah, it is, because we're all on that path. We all agree that that's the work we're doing, is that we're using this idea of how we see the world in an effective way, and still we forget. So that we come here so that we can help one another remember. So that you can help me remember, and I can help you remember. And that we can be there for one another. Then we take it out to the other parts of our lives, to our jobs, to our family reunions, and to all of those circumstances in our lives where people aren't looking at this on a daily basis, aren't working with this idea on a daily basis, aren't seeking to achieve something internally in their way of working in the world. Those people are reactive and are feeling separate. We come here and talk about oneness. The whole idea that really is there's only one thing going on, that the presence of the divine in you is relating to the presence of the divine in me, and vice versa. And that's all that's going on, that God is getting to know itself through us, as us, with us, in us. No separation. All one thing going on. And if you play in that world, how can you find fault? What part of God is it that you want to make wrong? However, those are still unrealized expectations that have to be brought forward, have to be looked at, so that we can know better who we are. That's the only thing to know, is who are we? And we must ask that question again and again and again, and continue to refine our understanding, so that we get the life that we've come to experience, so that we can be who we've come to be. That's the great work. So we come here. We come to a place like this to do that work. How does that work? Is it really just for me that I come here? Well, it's primarily for me that I come here. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the influence of this does not stop at these walls, or at your home, or at your general experience. And I found another quote that really spoke to me about that. It goes like this: the life I touch for good or ill will touch another life, and that in turn another, until who knows where the trembling stops, or in what far place my touch will be felt. Yeah. That's Frederick, I'm guessing here, Beckner? Something like that. Anyway, he's an American theologian who came up with this idea, and I think he's really onto something. Whatever whoever we leave this place with what's in our hearts, what's in our consciousness, who we see that we are, and we go out and we connect with other people at work, at home, at the mall, at family reunions. I guess I'm pushing that one right now. Wherever it is that we're touching other lives, they're taking that out and touching other lives, and other lives, and other lives. So where does the trembling end? Where does it stop? It has no borders. We're virtually from this place touching everyone on the planet, one way or another. How many degrees of separation did they say we have? 6, 7, who knows? That is amazing. If you think about how many people your life is touching, how are you touching them? Are you touching them with judgment? Are you touching them with fault finding? Or are you touching them with love? Are you touching them with encouraging and lifting them up? What is it to you? What kind of world do you want to live in? That's the world you're creating, and you're creating it far beyond your general area of influence. That's going all the way out, all across the planet. Now, are there other influences and other places? Absolutely. Which one's going to prevail? The one that's the clearest. So our work here is not only to come and have this influence within us, that something extraordinary is happening in understanding who we are. Not just stopping there, but recognizing that our consciousness of understanding is influencing everyone that we touch. So if we want to live in an evolved world, the thing to do is not complain about the world we live in, but to create the world that we desire by modeling it everywhere that we go. And coming to a place like this to practice, to get it down, to understand, so that when those moments of uncertainty come, we move through them very easily, very joyously. We get, I see, and we move on. What a great place to be. So this is what's been working on me as I've traveled from community to community. And it's really been helpful for me to sort of get a sense of what it is we're doing here. Someone at the ministers' gathering, we were in a small group discussion, and someone was complaining about the Christian church model. I don't know, it's kind of working. I was thinking about the Christian model, about how in the time, I'm going to just say it once, Joe. At the time of Jesus, over the next 100 years, when those books were written that they put together and called the New Testament, all those communities that started having churches in them, they weren't getting along so great. Why do you think Paul wrote all those letters? They weren't getting along. They weren't really getting it down. And he was trying to give them some direction to say how extraordinary what they were finding was. And it was. It was extraordinary. And I think sort of some of our communities are going through that right now, kind of struggling, trying to figure out who they are. Why is this so important? How are we supposed to do this? The idea is that we're learning how to do it. We're finding our way in this thing called metaphysics, which has been around forever, but is burgeoning forth as us right now in a really good way. It's important, the work that we're doing. We're changing the way people experience life on planet Earth. We're not the only ones, but we are certainly in the midst of that. And what we are doing is important. And I just want you to know that. So I've got one other really cool quote that I want to share with you. And I'm going to, Brian's going to put it up there in front of you, but I'm going to read it from the Science of Mind textbook. I got this really cool, it looks like a Bible, doesn't it? It's not. Science of Mind textbook. Now, here's what's interesting. Looks like I'm about halfway through, right? Yeah. So on this page right here, Holmes entitles it Final Conclusion. Wonder what all this is, don't you? Appendices, perhaps. No. Anyway, it really is a page that says Final Conclusion, and this is what it says. What the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principles than to have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. So let's talk about what that means. What the world needs is spiritual conviction. What do we need to be convicted of? We need to be convinced that what we're talking about in this teaching is real. We need to be convinced within us that this is so. Barbara and I spoke at a place called the Launching Pad on Friday night. We didn't actually speak. We did a Q&A. They actually called it Stump the Ministers. These are all young people. All of them are probably under 25. And they live in a communal environment. You can only imagine what that's like. And they're practicing this thing, but some of them go, hey, this isn't really working for me. How do we reconcile that? Well, the first thing you have to do is be convinced that it will work, because that's the basic premise on which this is created. Whatever you believe is what you're going to put out into the world, and that's what's going to be mirrored back to you. So if you think it doesn't work, it doesn't work. There's no way that your consciousness can see that. So if you do believe that it works, then it will work every single time. And that's what I find in my life, is that it works every single time. Because I am absolutely convinced this is so. I'm absolutely convinced that God is all there is. And there's absolutely nothing else. And that in that understanding, that the perfection of the divine has to show through. Oh, how do I deal with things that don't look that way? I have to work at it, just like you do. I have to look for the presence of the divine in every circumstance. And I can find it. I found it on the plane yesterday. Barbara and I, on the flight from Atlanta to Asheville yesterday, I was sitting in the front row of the plane on the aisle. She was sitting in the fourth row. We did not buy our tickets together. Actually, she was on my frequent flyer miles. So we're not able to do it. The plane was full. After we were both seated, a woman comes in and says that I'm sitting in her seat. And I said, what's your seat? And she says, well, it's 1D, which is a window, and I have to have an aisle seat. I get an idea. My wife's back in 4. You want to sit back there, and she'll sit up here in the window seat that you have? The woman's not happy about that. The guy in the second row says, I'll move back to 4, you sit here. Still, she's not happy, but she sat down in the aisle seat on the second row, and Barbara moved up. A few minutes later, another person comes on the plane and says, looks at Barbara and goes, actually, I'd moved over to the window, and Barbara's sitting in the aisle, and the woman looks at me and says, you're in my seat. Well, I'm in this seat because the woman in the next row said it was her seat. So the woman gets on her phone and says, actually, I'm in 1B. Well, that seat's still empty. But where am I going to go? Right? Not next to Barbara. So there's another couple in the seat behind us. The woman that started all this comes to the front row. Those two people switch, and Barbara ends up in an aisle seat in the second row. The woman sits down next to me. And after about a couple of minutes of this dancing around in the front of the plane, the woman looks at me and says, would you like to sit with your wife? I would switch seats with her. Barbara, what do you think? Sure. So up we go. We're switching seats again. I'm sitting there for a few minutes thinking, what a pain in the butt this was. But as we're flying, it's only a 30-minute flight to Asheville, so as we're on this flight, that's my first thing, is it's only a 30-minute flight, we can do anything for 30 minutes. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm sitting next to my wife. The people behind us, they weren't sitting together, they're sitting together, they're a couple sitting together now. And 2 other people had the opportunity to be generous, just because this woman came in on the plane and said that had misinformation about what her seat was. So as we land, I lean in front of Barbara, I look at the woman, she finally makes eye contact, she doesn't want to look at me. She's mad at me. She finally looks at me and I go, thank you. Because when you came on with that misinformation, we all moved around and got to sit with who we wanted to. And a couple people got the opportunity to be generous. She had a real time trying to take that all in. Because she wanted to blame somebody. But she finally just said, you're welcome. And it was a lovely opportunity for everybody to sit where they could sit in a nice way. And everybody was fine. That's how life works. In the midst of seeing the problem, you can't see how things are working out. They do work out. And when you're convinced of that, as Ernest Holmes says, what you'll end up with is an opportunity to experience it fully into your life. And that's worth doing. That's the experience we want. The idea of seeing a student who can prove the principle is to find someone who believes it, who has the conviction of it. It doesn't matter what you read. It doesn't matter what class you take, although take classes, they're fun. What matters is that you live this from your deepest conviction, when you do, your life shifts, and then you touch someone else and their life shifts. Because you model it. The early Christian church learned to model it. They learned to model love. And they changed humanity. What we're doing has the same potential. If we're willing to have the conviction to believe who we are, to believe in that truth, no matter what. So I invite you today to live in this truth no matter what. To practice it here with one another. And then to take it out into the world, everywhere else you go, and live in that truth. And what will happen is a world that works for everyone. That's what you can do. I love you very much.